Cornish beam engine at Taylor's Shaft of East Pool Mine is a 90-inch cylinder pumping engine, and after a 60-year working life, finally ceased operating in 1954. This massive machine was used to pump water from Taylor's Shaft, which is 1,700 feet deep. The rocking beam raised and lowered large timber rods in the shaft, which operated pumps on various levels. These pumps brought the water to the drainage adit and to the surface. Steam pumping allowed many mines in Cornwall to operate at greater depths, which meant that more ore could be won from the mine without the fear of flooding. The early 18th century engines of pioneers like Newcomen were crude affairs that were very inefficient, but once beam engines started to be used in Cornwall, it was not long before Watt and then local engineers started to improve their efficiency. Inventions improved performance over the years. Innovations like Watt's parallel motion, which guided the piston rod. Trevithick's Cornish boiler of around 1815 made the use of high-pressure steam possible, and a special status was given to engines made in the county. This led to the adoption of the name Cornish engine all over the world. The engine you see here is a fine example of the ultimate perfection of the Cornish beam engine, which was the result of many years of steady improvement. The large cylinder below you in its insulated cast iron jacket makes this the largest surviving engine in the county. As mines grew deeper, pumping engines were being made bigger and bigger, up to a massive 100 inches diameter. The largest engines, however, were exported to Holland to pump the Haarlemmermeer. These giants had a cylinder of 144 inches, and one survivor is the largest engine anywhere in the world. The beam and cylinder are probably the most visually interesting parts of the engine, but equally important were the many rods, levers and cams which operated the valves and other components. The valves had to be worked by hand to start the engine until full vacuum had been formed in the condenser, and their design became very sophisticated and complex. The quality of workmanship of the valve gear and other engine parts was superb, and manufacturers such as Harvey & Co., who made this engine, were soon exporting them to countries such as Ireland, Cuba, Mexico, South Africa and Australia. In fact, almost anywhere where hard rock mining was being carried out. London waterworks such as Kew provided a market second only in size to Cornwall. Others found their way into collieries and Cornwall's china clay pits. The reputation for quality and reliability of the Cornish engine caused them to be in great demand, and for a long period the foundries of Cornwall were large employers and bringers of wealth to the county. Pumping water out of the mines was not the only use which was made of the Cornish beam engine. Smaller and simpler rotary engines were used for winding and also for crushing ore. Winding engines had a cylinder diameter of perhaps 30 inches. These engines turned large drums which wound cables or chains up and down shafts. They were used to raise ore and waste rock, and in later years they also carried miners and tools. This did away with the exhausting task of climbing hundreds of feet of ladders, lit only by the light of a flickering candle. Engines for crushing ore were developed as stamps engines for tin, and crushers or rolls for copper. Another use of the beam engine in a few deep mines was the man engine, an early form of lift, used only for raising men. These hair-raising machines were not without accidents, and 31 men were killed in the infamous man engine disaster at Levant Mine in 1919. Like all machinery in the 19th century, much of the operation was activated by human hand. The involved procedure of starting a pumping engine was a skill learnt over many years, and engine drivers were a group of highly respected men who were held in high esteem by their fellow miners. Often Often the miners' lives are in the hands of a winder operator, or the engine man that kept the pumps going. These men were thus worthy of great respect. To get a pumping engine going was quite a business, and the operators got to know the quirks of their engines and could control them almost intuitively. Once the engine was operating smoothly, it could be left to run almost automatically. This was a great progression over other types of contemporary machine. The cleanliness and quality of maintenance was of great pride to the engine man, and generally the engine and house were kept in immaculate condition, some engine drivers being said to prefer their engines to their wives. Electric pumps were first used in Cornish mines in 1906, and most beam engines were scrapped or had ceased working by the start of World War II, due to the decline in mining. This engine continued because of the strategic need for tin and tungsten during the conflict. After the war, it continued to pump for nearby South Crofty mine, until it too was replaced by electric pumping. In the care of the National Trust, it is now a proud monument to the miners and ingenious engineers, whose legacy will live long in the memories of the people of Cornwall.